All right, so let's talk about the relationship between slope, unit rate, and rate of change. So two of these things should sound familiar. That's unit rate and rate of change. You guys have seen that before. So this year you are introduced to slope. So let's see how they're all related. So we've got some situations here. In each of these situations, we've got a description where we're going to find the unit rate and then write our equation. We have a table that we're going to fill out, and then we're going to graph it. So it says for each situation, find the unit, then create a table of values and graph to represent each situation. So number one says Carla picked 4 bushels of apples in 2 hours. So we want to find the unit rate. Well, to find the unit rate, all I need to do is divide the 4 bushels by the 2 hours it takes to pick them. So 4 divided by 2, I know gives me 2. So that 2 represents the number of bushels per hour. Okay, so I'll put B, P, H, bushels per hour. So if she picks 4 bushels of apples in 2 hours, that means she picks 2 bushels of apples in 1 hour. Where it says, what is the cost per unit rate? Don't worry about that. And so my equation, okay, we're going to let Y equal the number of bushels is equal to my rate, which is 2, times the number of hours, which we're going to represent with X. So our equation is Y equals 2X. So if I put this in a table, so here's my table. I've got hours, I've got bushels. Remember, your X will always come first, then your Y. Okay, so let's fill out our table. Well, before she starts picking, so if we're at 0 hours, all right, she hasn't started yet. So she hasn't picked any bushels. So she's at 0. After 1 hour, well, we know 2 bushels per hour would be 2. Okay, after 2 hours, well, if I take this 2, multiply it by the 2 bushels per hour, we get 4. After 3 hours, if I take that 3, multiply it by the 2 bushels per hour, we get 6. And then let's skip 4, let's do 5. All right, so after 5 hours, if I take those hours, multiply it by our unit rate, which is 2, we get 10 bushels. All right, so our rate of change. So let's do a quick review. Rate of change is your change in Y divided by your change in X. Well, my change in Y, I'm going from 0 to 2, right? So that's 2. My change in X, I'm going from 0 to 1, so that's 1. If I take my change in Y, 2, divide it by 1, we get a rate of change of 2. All right, so now let's graph it. So here's my X-axis, here's my Y. X is going to represent our hours. I'm just going to put an H here for hours. B, I'm going to put for bushels on my Y-axis. And then let's number our graph. So our origin, where X and Y meet, is 0, 0. And then for hours, since my lines are close together, I'm going to skip 1 for every hour. So that's 1. I'm going to skip 1. That's 2. Skip 1. That's 3. Skip 1. That's 4. Skip 1. And that's 5. All right, so let's see how my bushels are. They're going from 0 to 10. So I'll let each line represent 1 bushel, but as far as numbering them, I'm going to number every other line. So that would be 1, skip 1. That would be 2 bushels, 3, which I'm going to skip. So the next one would be 4. So I'm basically numbering by 2. So skip 1, that would be 6. Skip 1, that would be 8. Skip 1, and then that would be 10. And I'm going to go ahead and stop since that's my maximum number of bushels. All right, so each X and each Y represents an ordered pair or a point on my graph. So if I start with 0, 0, well, that's my origin, right? We haven't gone anywhere. So my next one would be 1, 2. So at 1 hour, we're at 2 bushels. So I'm going to put a dot there. At 2 hours, we're at 4 bushels. So at 2 hours, we're at 4 bushels. I'm going to put a dot there. 3 hours, we're at 6. So 3 and 6. And then 5 and 10. So I'm going to go down to 5 go up to 10, and then just connect my dots to create my line. Now to find my slope. So slope, a way I can find this if I have a graph is I can create a right triangle between 2 points, and I can count my change in y, how much I have to go up or down, and divide it by my change in x, however many I need to go over. We call that rise over run. So if I'm starting at this point, well, on my y-axis, I'm at 2. I'm going up to 4. So that's a change of 2. And then on my x-axis, I'm at 1 and I'm going to 2. So that's a change of 1. So if I take my change in y, which is 2, divide it by my change in x, which is 1, I get 2. All right, again, that's rise over run, rise over run. And as we can see, my slope, my rate of change, and my unit rate are all the same, right? They're all 2. So when we're talking about slope, unit rate, and rate of change, it's all the same thing, okay? We're just calling it something different. So you guys have been introduced to unit rate and rate of change. It's the same thing as slope. We're just talking about its relationship when we're looking at it on a graph. We call it slope if I'm looking at a line. All right, let's do one more, and then you guys can do the last one. All right, so let's erase this. Let's go down. Put this back up. All right, so a train traveled 325 miles in 5 hours. So I want to find the unit rate. I want to know how far that train traveled in 1 hour. Well, to do that, I'm just going to take that 325, divide it by 5, which will give me, let me grab my calculator, 325 divided by 5 gives us a unit rate of 65. So my unit rate is 65, and that would be miles m per hour. All right, what is the cost per unit rate? Don't worry about that. So our equation, all right, so y equals my rate, which is 65, times x. All right, so now let's fill in our table. So here's my x, here's my y. X will always be your time. So right here, I've got hours. So x is going to be my hours. And then y will be my miles. All right. So before we've left, so at 0 hours, we've gone 0 miles, right? We haven't left yet. After 1 hour, well, that's my unit rate, right? 65 miles per hour. So after 1 hour, we've gone 65 miles. So after 2 hours, I can take this 2, multiply it by my unit rate of 65, and I get 130. Now let's do 3 hours. Well, if I take that 3, I multiply it by my unit rate, which is 65, we get 195. All right, and then let's do 4. So after 4 hours, again, if I take that 4, multiply it by my unit rate of 65, we get 260. So let's find rate of change. Again, rate of change, I'm looking at the change in my y and dividing it by the change in my x. So if I'm going from 0 to 65, that's a change of 65. If I'm going from 0 to 1, that's a change of 1. If I divide 65 divided by 1, we get 65. All right, so now let's graph it. So again, my x is hours, so I'm just going to put an h for hours. My y is miles. I'm going to put an m for miles. And then let's number our graph. So here's my origin, 0, 0. My hours are going from 0 to 4, so I'm going to do exactly what I did last time. I'm going to skip 1, put a 1, skip 1, put a 2, skip 1, put a 3, skip 1, put a 4, and I'm going to go ahead and stop since I'm only going up to 4. Now, let's see, I'm going from, on my miles, from 0 to 260. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and label or count my y-axis or miles by, let's do every other line is 50. All right, so that would be 50. So really each line is going to represent 25. So 25, 50, 75. I'll label this one 100. 125, this would be 150. 175, this would be 200. 225, this would be 250. 275, and then this one would be 300. And then I will go ahead and stop there since my largest y value on my table is 260. Now let's go ahead and plot our points. So at 0 hours, I'm at 0 miles. So that's my origin, 0, 0. After 1 hour, I'm at 65 miles. So 1 hour, 65 is going to be somewhere in between 50 and 75, right about there. 2 and 130. So 130 is going to be in between 125 and 150, right about there, I'd say. 3 and 195. So 195 is going to be just below 200. So right about there. And then 4 and 260. So 260 is going to be right above my 250. And so I should have a straight line. So let's connect our dots. And kind of straight. I'm not very good at drawing straight lines, but there we go. All right, so now let's find our slope. So a way to find our slope, if I'm looking at a graph, is I can pick 2 points, create my right triangle, and do rise over run, or my change in y divided by my change in x. So if I'm looking at this point, so this line was at 65. This point was at 130, right? Well, I know the difference between 130 and 65 is 65. So that's my change in y. So here I'm at 65. I go up to 130. That's a change of 65. And then my hours, I'm going from 1 to 2. Well, that's a change in 1, right? So rise 65 divided by run, which was 1, gives me a slope of 65. All right, and as you can see, our slope, our rate of change, and our unit rate are all the same. All right, so those are 2 examples. What I want you guys to do is go ahead and use those examples, and I want you to try the third one. So go ahead and calculate your unit rate first. Where it says what is the cost per unit rate, you can go ahead and cross that out. Your equation, y equals whatever your unit rate is times x. Okay, fill in your table. All right, and then you're going to graph that. Here, I'll get you started. So for number 3, as far as filling in your table, your x-axis is going to be your yards. And then your y-axis is going to be your cost, just so there's no confusion as to what your x and y is. So x is going to be yards, and then your y is going to be cost. All right.